Welcome, everybody. We'll begin our service now with music to help us settle into this time and into this place. Of course, everyone's muted, and as we're listening to the in-gathering music, please feel free to enter into the chat box to say good morning, where you're coming from, and any changes you might have noticed in the natural world around you and that connected you with sacred this week. Thank you, James. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Community Worship and to the UU Congregation of Charlottesville. My name is Brett Gastinger, and I am thankful to be serving as worship weaver today. But it's not just me, it's actually, you're in for a treat. It's the entire worship weaver team this morning. All 5 of us will be participating and weaving worship together. We thank Sean Scally and Kelly Dryden for also working behind the scenes to keep up with our many changes and spotlighted speakers. That's our virtual sanctuary that we're working in right now. Our physical sanctuary was built in 1950 on hilltop land acquired by the church after World War II. For centuries before us, this land had been the dwelling place of the Monacan people, and later that land was part of plantations for the Norris family and then Rugby, who each enslaved African Americans for labor and profit. We honor all those who dwelt there before and all those whose lives led to this moment of us being together in this video screen as a community of memory and hope. And now I'd like to introduce Pam McIntyre from our Board of Trustees, who's here to welcome us.
Welcome to church. I'm Pam McIntyre. I'm president of the Board of Trustees. One of the many things I love about being part of UUCville is being in a community of people who are thinking about the world and trying to make things better. Sometimes in these pandemic days, I can feel isolated, a bit lonely, and discouraged about the things that are happening in the world. When I spend time in our congregational community, in Sunday services, in board meetings, and smaller groups, I remember that there are good people in the world working on good and important things, and I feel heartened. I'm grateful to be here. I do miss being together in person, and I especially miss hearing more about what everybody is thinking. We will have 2 Zoom listening conversations in September to hear about what matters to you and what you think our goals for developmental ministry should be. I look forward to seeing you there. I will stay on Zoom after today's service, and you can also email me at president@uucharlottesville.org. It's good to be together today. Thank you.
We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. We are working to be free. Hate and greed and jealousy. We are working to be free. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. We can feed our every need. Start with love, that is the seed. We can feed our every need. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Peace and freedom is our cry. Without these, the world will die. Peace and freedom is our cry. We are building a new way. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way. We are building a new way, feeling stronger every day. We are building a new way.
This morning, we light our chalice with the words of Reverend Scott Taylor, Building the Possible. May this flame cast its light towards the coming days, reminding us that the future is not simply a place where we are going, but a place we are creating. The path of new possibilities will not be found, but made. A new world is waiting to be built. May our time together light the way.
As we gather this Labor Day weekend, we want to take a moment to honor this holiday, what it signifies, and also explore how work and our spiritual lives are connected. Labor Day is the federal holiday in the United States that celebrates and recognizes the achievements of American workers. The roots of Labor Day date back to the decades following the Civil War, when workers took part in strikes and rallies to demand shorter workdays and better working conditions. After the deadly Pullman strike of 1894, the day was a conciliatory gesture to the forces of labor and the unrest that followed. As UUs, we are called to work to recognize and fairly compensate the efforts of workers in the US and around the world, and to dismantle the racial and gender inequities that form the machinery of our labor system. And earlier this week, Reverend Leah shared with us, the worship weavers, a really nice set of suggestions of ways that you can celebrate Labor Day in that follow our UU principles. And I'll put a link to that in the chat box now. We also want to look at the relationship of work as a spiritual practice. How are we making this world and this vision that we see as UUs in our day-to-day lives? And today, the 5 worship weavers have been asked to reflect on our own personal experiences. What calls us to our work? And how do UU principles resonate in our day-to-day? As scientists, designers, teachers, we hope this will inspire you to think about your own vocation in new ways. Howard Thurman eloquently noted, "Don't ask what the world needs. Ask what makes you come alive and go do it. Because what the world needs is people who have come alive."
Science has been in my blood, my mind, and especially my heart for as long as I can remember. I got my first microscope in elementary school, and I was hooked. When I was 10, I decided I wanted to study DNA. Around that time, my parents gave me a subscription to the brand new scientific magazine, Discover. In fact, there is a computer-generated image of DNA on the cover of their premiere issue. One of the first articles I read was about the promise of gene therapy, and it fascinated me. As an undergraduate, I also took many philosophy and religion classes. In fact, this study paired intimately with my understanding of science. I still have a copy of a paper I wrote for my undergraduate ethics course entitled Faith and Reason in Science and Religion. For me, there truly has never been a difference. My faith in science and my understanding of and relationship with the divine are intertwined. The more I learned about DNA, the more spiritual it became. Doesn't it take your breath away to know that 4 little building blocks, adenine, cytosine, guanine, and thymine, are the basis of all life as we know it? Every living thing, from the most basic single-celled organism to the most complex mammal, is built upon the structure of nucleic acids and the way they code for proteins. It is awe-inspiring that the incredible, rich diversity of life is built around this simple, elegant structure. More than that, I see the sacred in the double helix. Okay, back to the spirituality of my chosen path for my career. When I was 17, I thought I had my future planned out. I'd get my bachelor's degree, then my PhD, and I would research DNA and gene therapy. My paper I wrote for that ethics class started out with a scenario of a young man who had cancer, writing a letter to his mother about the gene therapy treatment that he was about to receive, a treatment that would save his life. It all sounded entirely plausible, if hypothetical, to my young mind. So fast forward a bit. I was 20, close to completing my bachelor's degree, and newly married to a wonderful man named Chris. As many of you know, 2 months after our wedding, Chris was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, a very aggressive cancer. I dropped out of school so I could be with him throughout his treatment. Sadly, less than 2 years later, Chris died. And I cannot talk about the spirituality of my chosen work without talking about Chris's death. My career path suddenly had a very personal feel. I changed my plans a bit. Instead of a PhD and basic research, I got my master's degree and trained in clinical diagnostics. For 25 years, my work focused on cancer diagnostics as well as infectious diseases, many of which are specific issues for cancer patients. It felt like the right path for me. It felt true. It felt like my calling and a way of honoring Chris's memory. It has fit with my UU faith in many meaningful ways. In particular, being part of the medical field has allowed me to work toward justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, our second principle. My deep fascination with biology is a way for me to express my own free and responsible search for truth and meaning, our fourth principle. And as many of you know, my career has taken a new turn with my move out here to Oregon. I now work in the molecular diagnostics, virology, and serology lab at the Oregon Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. In many ways, this feels closer to the basic science that I find fun. I'm learning all kinds of new things, like which sexually transmitted infections in cattle, horses, and goats cause fertility issues and fetal loss, and how to remove the brain of a dead bat to test for rabies. The work this lab performs has a direct impact on the health and well-being of humans, as well as other species who share this planet with us. As I move into this new phase of my career, I am honoring our seventh principle, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. I am immensely grateful and I feel fulfilled, and I know Chris would be happy for me.
Thank you so much for sharing, Dawn. My name is Haley Owens, and I'm going to share also. So many of the UU values that show up in my work were shaped by my time as a youth in our congregation's religious education programs. So I wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at what those programs taught me. Starting in 6th grade, I was part of groups that explored other faiths together, delved into our own beliefs, learned about human sexuality, and grew more aware of our interconnection as we engaged our community outside the walls of the Summit House. These groups where we felt the love and effort put in by our mentors to shape spaces where we could thrive and grow. And I felt seen and heard. I could ask questions. I could be myself in all the imperfect that I was then and I am now. I am so grateful for the experience that so many of you who are here right now gave to me. So These were inclusive spaces where we as young people were treated with respect and asked big questions. There was a foundational belief that every voice was valuable and everyone had something meaningful to contribute. In the same way that it was our mentors' responsibility to create spaces that helped us feel safe to share, it was our responsibility to share our valuable experiences with each other that would add to each other's understanding. We practiced hearing our voices matter, but understanding that they mattered as much as anyone else's. In Why Are You, we asked questions about our own faith with a year exploring our beliefs with mentors and each other. In our sharing, each of us developed the capacity to really listen and respect each other for our own beliefs and journey, while also being able to go deeper and more creatively into our own. No one of us had the right answer. Each of us contributed to shape a full and rich picture of the world. We were developing the capacity to hold many, sometimes opposing, truths at once. We were developing a love for the diversity created by openly sharing and honoring each other. So you may be wondering, Haley's profession must be highly relational. But if I told you that I was a young architect, would you be surprised? Today, as a young designer, I find myself deeply interested in how groups work, grow, and transform to build something relevant together. Architects are the kind of designer that look for solutions to problems in our society through the built environment. The more experience I get in the profession, however, I realize that building requires resources and access that very few have. The problems we end up solving and building are the ones often defined by those with power and resources. So, as you might imagine, the problem might have a limited view. In my work, I strive to help make meaningful changes in our world that help address problems at the root. And that foundational experience of groups living in our UU values and RE taught me that the more people engaged in making the solution, the more likely we will create a world that will work for all of us. Further, it's not just about being inclusive of many voices, it's about doing so in intentional spaces that grow our relationships to one another. Instead of working to create solutions to symptoms, I think designers have the capacity to host conversations, to bring different groups together, and to grow relationships, to knit networks with collective power that can transform communities. It is by building long-term relationships and creating tools for people to help themselves that we create sustainable solutions. Design has always been a collaborative process, but I think that my UU values show up for me in the depth I seek to take that collaboration. In order to feel the work is worthwhile, the circle must be drawn wide. Each person's voice is respected and important to the process. No one of us has the right answer, but each authentically explores their own. When we come together and collaborate in right relationship with each other, the world we build is transformed. Thank you.
And now let us contemplate our own practices of abundance, of gratitude, and of generosity. Generosity is part of a spiritual practice, and we take time each week in worship to name the importance of supporting this spiritual community and its work. There are so many ways to give, that we give and receive these gifts in this community. Together, we build the future of our congregation and our larger community. I am thankful that we are on this journey together, and I am thankful for our abundance. Thank you, James. That was beautiful. And now let us dedicate all of the many gifts together by saying, we accept your gifts with gratitude. May we use them wisely for the highest good.
As a young boy, I grew up bewildered and transfixed by architecture. My father was a practicing architect, and I was lucky to spend time in his office, organizing materials, running prints, going through drawers and moving drawings around and meeting fellow architects. And some of my wonder, I think, was partly due to seeing all these really interesting tools of making scales with lots of different numbers on them, triangles, lead pointers, big drawings on massive pieces of paper. And at the same time, I began to learn how perspective drawings were constructed and how computers could model things in 3 dimensions. But the other part of learning to love architecture was having my dad there to help me see that buildings shape how we feel. The choreography of spaces, light, shadow, the quality of materials, the sound of a space, the views that are shaped into the world beyond. These are also the tools of an architect, and the ability to shape those things was some kind of magic. It wasn't a hard decision to enter architecture school for college. I definitely had the bug. And that's how I ended up in Charlottesville. It took all of about 2 minutes on a stunning October Saturday, walking on the lawn with beautiful light, the rotunda, pavilions, the terraces and arcades, brilliant sunshine, orange fall leaves. I knew that this is where I wanted to study. I was pretty darn sure of myself. But something happened in school that I didn't expect, and it forever altered my perspective and shaped my professional life. Because of teachers and the way that the program was organized, my world expanded. I began to see architecture not on its own, but within the world around it, in its landscape. Now, when I use the word landscape, I do not use it as a substitute for nature. For me, landscape is a human construction. It's a mixture, it's a balance of nature and human alteration. And it's also part of our perception. Landscape And what we see is shaped by the stories we heard as children, our experiences, and the parts of the world that can nurture us, excite us, or even frighten us. Landscape architecture was a field that I learned about that used all the same cool tools as architects, but had the same magic capacity to shape human emotion and experience. But it was, for me, even harder. It was less predictable, wilder, deeper, more layered, filled with stories, muddier, bigger, sharper, loftier, and more mysterious. My colleagues and I will often remark that architecture looks its best immediately upon completion on day one, while landscape architecture often looks its worst. You know, spindly little trees, lots of mulch, things that haven't become. Landscapes require time, patience, I'd say even faith, and humility. And I came to learn it's this humility in the face of the mysteries of nature that makes design in the landscape a spiritual endeavor. When we design landscapes, when we shape our landscape, we reveal our fundamental understanding of the relationship of human beings to the natural order. And what does that mean? I don't know if that, for me, I don't know if that sounds to you self-evident or wonky, but let me try to explain it a little bit further. What I'm talking about happens in landscapes of all different kinds of scales, but it might be most legible in gardens. Gardens are our expressions of a balance of human intervention and natural wonder. And gardens can be wildly variable. They can be more or less constructed. They can have different materials, scales, and aesthetics. And this can be anywhere from expansive English gardens that are like parks to abstract Japanese rock gardens to formal French parterres, but also our own backyards, the grounds at UVA, and our own campus at the Unitarian Universalist Congregation of Charlottesville. These variations aren't just aesthetic preferences or differences. At a deep level, they do come from different understandings of relationships with the divine and the natural order. And landscape and gardens don't just appear. Gardens are in a constant state of becoming. So the design and the subsequent gardening, they're ongoing, evolving, an adaptive dance between nature and human intention. Through gardens, we can be amazed at the productive capacity of plants to grow and mature, especially here in Virginia. We can struggle and be frustrated because a particular thing won't thrive where we want it. And we can be overwhelmed at a singular beauty in the change of the seasons. Through gardens, we see things in our world we didn't notice before. And I don't think it's any coincidence that gardening is one of the most healthy and sustaining activities that promotes longevity. For me, creating landscapes is a hopeful act. It's one of faith and one that continuously calls me to imagine a better world and to work to put that vision into motion. It's Labor Day weekend, and I hope that many of you will be outside tomorrow, today, and it can be a hard time for gardens and home landscapes. It's a time of change, decay, preparation for winter. But if you're outside or planning your garden or window box for next year, I hope you can do so with joy, wonder, faith, and humility. Thank you.
Thank you, Breck. The Italian educator Maria Montessori once said that the real preparation for education is a study of oneself. The training of the teacher who is to help life is something far more than the learning of ideas. It includes the training of character. It is a preparation of the spirit. And I do believe that this is true for all teachers. I stumbled into a Montessori classroom in my 20s, and I fell in love with the concrete math materials because I'd always had trouble visualizing math. I also loved the feeling of a classroom where young children moved purposefully and freely. But it has only been in the last 10 years or so that I've really understood how truly revolutionary the Montessori method of teaching is. Practiced well, the Montessori system allows each child to make their own choices, contribute to their own education, and organize their own time. The child can develop and maintain a love of learning and a sense of critical reason. It affords the child movement and freedom within limits. The teacher acts as a guide and connects children with the classroom materials. The guide, myself, is someone who deeply respects each child and where they are in their stage of development in the moments we meet them. I find that in my practice as an elementary Montessori teacher or guide, it's an effort to improve the functionality of my classroom. I continually learn and I continually grow spiritually. The more I welcome all the parts of my own heart's journey, the better I can welcome everything that arises in the classroom. It's very difficult and it requires a lot of energy and concentration. It's only through cultivating my own inner observer that I've become better equipped to fully observe the children I work with and see them more clearly. I watch the children for signs of deep concentration, awakened interest, and heightened enthusiasm. I work from these observations to guide and lead children when they're ready as individuals to pursue studies in all the areas of the classroom. I've trained myself not to interfere or conspicuously praise a child's efforts, although praise is something I do with attention to detail in the right moment. It's a delicate balance of learning to wait and watch and learning when to state things clearly and directly and explicitly. One of the important ways I teach is by being a role model. Whether I like it or not, everything I do or say may be observed and assimilated by the children in my care. And so I have to be very self-aware in my movements, my words, my kindness, my responses to the children's activity. When I enter the classroom, I try to check my fatigue, impatience, my bad mood, or my worry about all the things that are going on right now at the door. I strive to model curiosity about the world, respect for all living creatures, including the bugs that often cross our doorstep, and true presence and caring for my young friends. A Montessori classroom is meant to be a community and a largely self-sustaining one. Especially at the elementary level, it's my honor and privilege to contribute to creating systems that build community and spark learning. And then I get to stand back and watch. I love finding ways to help children connect with each other, value each other, and learn to solve problems that arise between them. The children are encouraged to show each other's skills and work together to solve problems. Frequently, we recognize that conflict is an inevitable part of life, and there are tools that we can solve our problems peacefully with. Children are learning to collaborate rather than compete, and they learn about each other's gifts. Learning to work together is one of the main things children are learning. It's always so satisfying to see the children in my care go out to the playground and continue to choose to be together in one large group. I can see that they have come to truly appreciate each other in their differences and similarities. The elementary Montessori curriculum paints our history on Earth in large brush strokes. And we see that human beings have only been on the planet for seconds compared to the time it took for the Earth to prepare itself for our arrival. It provides us with a sense of how precious this life is and how important and unimportant our actions are in the grand scheme of things. How will we use our time on earth? What gifts shall we focus on and leave behind? These are the questions I am privileged to ask myself and the children every day. We study math, language, science, biology, geometry, all in the context of the larger human drama and story. For me, teaching has been a journey of the spirit.
Thank you to Debbie, Breck, Haley, and Dawn, all inspiring reflections. I don't think of myself as a particularly spiritual person. I don't believe that the name Greg Townsend and the word spiritual had ever been used in the same sentence before I wrote this one. If you ask my friends and family to describe me, the words Mr. Spock or robot would be much more likely to be used than would yogi. And if yogi were offered up, it would be followed immediately by Bera or bear. So I came to instantly question my decision to agree to participate in this service. Reverend Linda suggested I could think of myself as a guardian. And I tried to imagine myself as Idris Elba, sword in hand, playing Hemdall on the Rainbow Bridge in Ragnarok, watching out for invaders. But I realized that I couldn't pull that off. So I got to thinking about what spirituality means for me. And what it means for me is a search for meaning or purpose in life. For as long as I can remember, I have considered that my purpose in life is to help make life better for the people around me and for the world at large, and to help make the world to come better than the one we live in today. That was instilled in me by my parents and the times that I grew up in. And that played a large role in my decision to become a physician and ultimately to become a specialist in the field of infectious diseases at an academic medical center. Unlike any other field in medicine, the field of infectious diseases is to a large extent about illnesses that can pass from one living thing to another. Like many physicians and other healthcare providers, every day at work, I am afforded the opportunity to help my patients to be healthier. And like many in academic medicine, every day, I have the chance to help my trainees to be more skilled in their medical capabilities. But unlike most, I'm also able to help my community, including this congregation, to be a little safer. That's the Heimdall in me. So my spirituality helped to guide me into medicine. I believe, or anyway, I hope, that spirituality also plays a prominent role in the way that I practice medicine. By this, I mean that a spiritual medical practice is one that is conducted with compassion. And by compassion, I refer to the root meaning of the word, to suffer with. A compassionate healthcare provider is one who empathizes with and feels the suffering of their patients and community, their pain, discomfort, stress, unease, confusion, apprehension, anger, despair. It requires me to be fully present, attentive, and able to hear what my patients are telling me, not just what I want to hear or am able to attend to. I am sure that I fail in this more often than I'd like to think, but I strive to achieve that ideal, as I'm sure do many in my field. I came to this faith late in life, so the UU principles were not my guides in shaping my spirituality or in choosing my career path. However, my career path has allowed me to live in harmony with and affirmation of several of the principles: the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relations, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. I feel fortunate to be in a position where every day I can try to make the world a better place. This is my spirituality in action. Thank you.
I will get this meeting down. Thank you, Greg, and thanks to all the worship weavers for sharing today, digging deep. The benediction today comes from the Reverend Sherry Woodbury. What a world there can be if we imagine, if we share, if we care, if we act. What a world there can be if we are indivisible in heart and make the most of our one shot. Let us trust the seeds we plant in time will flourish and that we can create the tipping points for a better future. For our children's children and the great web of life on earth, let us make a new start. So may it be. Amen. Thank you, James, and thank you to everyone